wife returns with another man to honor, her late husband, only to witness a heart-wrenching scene. She never could have imagined that 10 years after her husband's death, Hachiko would still be waiting at the station entrance for his return. Looking at the aging Hachiko, there was nothing but sorrow in his eyes. Even his wife had emerged from the shadow of her husband's death and begun a new life. Yet Hachiko remained in the same spot, silently waiting for his master to appear. In 10 years, even the most devoted lovers cannot guarantee their faithfulness, but this dog had achieved a lifetime of unwavering loyalty. The coffee vendor nearby couldn't help but shed tears. Perhaps only he knew what Hachiko had endured over these 10 years. Hachiko recognized his former mistress, but his eyes darted away nervously, afraid of missing any passenger emerging from the station. 10 years ago, Hachiko first met his master at this very station. Perhaps it was fate's arrangement that he blocked the path of the music professor returning home late from work. Fortunately, the professor was kind-hearted and knew that such a clean little dog couldn't be astray. Even after the last train departed, no owner came for the puppy. The professor approached the station management, hoping to leave the dog there until its owner came looking. However, the manager said they could only keep it for one night. If no one claimed it the next day, it would have to be sent to an animal shelter. Seeing the manager's reluctance, the professor had no choice but to secretly take the little dog home. Since his wife didn't want a dog, he settled the little fellow in the first-floor study, and his wife didn't notice anything unusual. As he went upstairs, he prayed the puppy would spend the night quietly. But the little dog was far from being as well-behaved as it appeared. Soon it managed to squeeze through a gap in the door and escape. Following the stairs, it made its way to the bedroom, interrupting the couple's intimate moment. The wife wasn't entirely opposed to dogs. They had owned one before, though it had once hurt her. The professor promised to send it away the next day, but asked if it could stay in the storage room for just one night. His wife reluctantly agreed. The professor arranged a small bed for it and, fearing it might feel lonely, brought a stuffed toy. After settling everything, he turned off the light to leave, but seeing the little one looked frightened, he quickly turned the light back on. It seemed this dim light could provide some sense of security. The next day, their daughter saw the puppy and loved it immediately. She wanted her mother to keep the dog. The father thought there might be hope for keeping it, but the next moment, his wife pulled out adoption notices from the newspaper. Clearly, there was no room for negotiation. Reluctantly, the professor took the little dog to the animal shelter, but all the cages in the car were full. The staff said they could only keep it temporarily for 2 weeks. If no one adopted it by then, they would euthanize the puppy. The professor couldn't bear to abandon the beloved dog, so he took it to a friend's bookstore. His friend liked the dog very much, but seeing the puppy being bullied by cats, the professor abandoned the idea of leaving it there. Deep down, the professor knew he was unwilling to give the dog away. He could only take the puppy with him on the train to school for his classes. The little fellow was indeed troublesome. Before long, it had chewed through its restraints and escaped. It was full of curiosity about this new place. After class, the professor learned from his Japanese colleague that this was a Japanese Akita dog, and the scar hanging on its collar meant good luck in Japan. The professor decided to name it Hachiko. When he asked his colleague if he wanted to adopt it, the colleague said that Hachiko had already chosen him as its master. From that moment on, it would follow him for life. To keep Hachiko, they deliberately started playing on the floor. Seeing her husband and the dog playing happily together, his wife no longer insisted on sending the dog away. Before long, however, strange sounds came from the room. Hachiko had destroyed a craft piece that his wife had spent months creating. Unsurprisingly, they were thrown out of the house. That night, Hachiko was still locked in the storage room. It saw its master seemingly having a big argument with his wife. Hachiko realized it had probably done something wrong. Soon, the master came over. He was worried that Hachiko might be scared alone, so he secretly brought it into the house. Having just argued with his wife, he didn't dare return to the bedroom, so he held Hachiko and watched a baseball game. When his wife found them downstairs, the professor had already fallen asleep on the sofa. The next day, his wife received a call from someone wanting to adopt Hachiko. Just as she was happily taking out paper and pen to write down the caller's address, she saw her husband playing joyfully with Hachiko in the yard, with their daughter soon joining in. It had been a long time since such a warm scene had appeared in their home. His wife was not heartless. She directly told the caller that the puppy had already been adopted. And so, Hachiko officially became a member of the family. Under loving care, it gradually grew up. But as it aged, Hachiko became increasingly attached to people. Every time the professor went to work, Hachiko would reluctantly lie at the entrance watching his master leave. One day, it finally couldn't bear the loneliness and dug its way out from the backyard. The professor had just sat down when he saw Hachiko appear on the platform. He could hardly believe his eyes. He never imagined Hachiko could find the station by itself. The professor wanted it to go back, but Hachiko wanted to go to work with him. After taking just 2 steps, it chased after him again. The professor had no choice but to miss that train and personally take Hachiko home, filling up the hole it had dug for its escape. Before leaving, he warned Hachiko not to run out again. But as the sun was setting, he suddenly heard the train's whistle entering the station. Hachiko seemed to sense something, and with one leap, jumped out of the yard. It trotted all the way to the station and sat on the flower bed by the entrance, waiting for its master to return from work. Just then, the professor emerged from that door behind. Seeing its master, Hachiko ran over and jumped right into his arms. The professor was delighted and hugged it happily. No one would refuse such an enthusiastic embrace from their dog after work. He thought his wife had brought Hachiko over, but the coffee vendor said it had come by itself. The next day, when the professor went to work, Hachiko followed again. After calling the dog back and about to close the door and leave, he saw Hachiko looking up at him with pitiful, pleading eyes. The professor felt somewhat helpless but ultimately softened and let it follow. From that day on, the professor had an escort on his commute. Hachiko was very well behaved, quietly leaving after seeing its master to the station, leaving behind envious passersby. In the afternoon, when the professor's return train arrived punctually, Hachiko would also arrive on time, standing on the flower bed waiting for its master. It would spot its master in the crowd at first glance, and then excitedly rush into his arms, feeling Hachiko's sincere longing. Regardless of severe cold or scorching heat, wind, frost, rain, or snow, Hachiko would always arrive at the station flower bed precisely at 5 o'clock to wait. Gradually, everyone in the small town came to know him. Until this day, he greeted Hachiko as usual to go to work together, but Hachiko behaved unusually, backing away repeatedly, puzzling the professor. It wasn't until Hachiko watched its master's departing train that it seemed to sense something ominous. In the classroom, while the professor was lecturing to students, he suddenly felt unwell and collapsed to the ground the next second. Unexpectedly, the professor left this world forever. At 5 p.m., many people poured out of the station, but there was no sign of the master. Soon the station emptied, and still no professor emerged from behind the door. This was the first time Hachiko hadn't waited for its master. However, not knowing what had happened, it could only continue waiting. Until late at night, a beam of light shone on Hachiko's face. It was the son-in-law coming to the station to take him home. That night, Hachiko saw through the wall cracks that the house was filled with sorrow. The soft weeping of his wife and daughter foretold something. Intelligent Hachiko must have guessed. The next day, the family held a funeral for the professor. All relatives and friends were present to commemorate this beloved man. But Hachiko didn't come. As usual, he arrived at the station before 5 o'clock, sitting on the flower bed directly facing the entrance, waiting for his master to get off work. But the professor never appeared again. Until late at night, after the last train left the platform, Hachiko was still waiting on the flower bed. The train conductor, deeply moved by this scene, came to the flower bed to persuade Hachiko to leave. Eventually, the conductor left too. For Hachiko, the distance between life and death was incomprehensible. He only felt that since his master had left from here, he would surely return from here. Later, his wife moved away from this sad place. Hachiko was taken to live with his daughter and son-in-law's family. One day, taking advantage of the son-in-law's return from work, Hachiko suddenly rushed out of the house. No matter how the son-in-law called, it wouldn't turn back. Hachiko crossed through the snowy woods to that familiar railway track. Following the rails, he searched his way back to his original home based on memory, but strangers had long since moved in. Disappointed, Hachiko ran out of the house and returned to the station where he first met the professor. Once again, he sat down on the flower bed facing the main entrance. Soon after, his daughter and son-in-law found him at the station. After some persuasion, Hachiko got in the car with them, but after returning, he remained unhappy every day. Suddenly, a sound caught Hachiko's attention. It was the whistle of a train entering the station. Hachiko came to the fence, his eyes full of longing. His daughter understood his thoughts. Hachiko resolutely returned to the station. This time, he truly became a stray dog. From then on, Hachiko crouched on the flower bed, beginning his long wait. For him, waiting was happiness, because every person who emerged from behind the door filled Hachiko with anticipation. Thanks to the professor's good relationships with the neighbors during his lifetime, Hachiko didn't have to worry about food. He would run to the station early every day to wait, only coming down from the flower bed when he saw the vendor closing up late at night, then going to rest on some abandoned tracks. Soon, Hachiko's story was reported in the news. His loyalty moved people from all walks of life, who sent him food and money. The station manager became Hachiko's caretaker. From then on, Hachiko continued waiting on the flower bed, from the vibrant early spring to the withering cold winter. He waited at the bustling station for a full 10 years. Only death could sever his longing for his master. Hachiko demonstrated through his actions what love and loyalty truly mean. This day, the professor's wife returned to revisit old places, coming back to attend her husband's 10th anniversary memorial. As she returned from the ceremony, she witnessed a shocking scene on the street. A stray dog with dirty, matted fur and an aged appearance was walking toward the station. It was Hachiko, who had kept vigil at the station for 10 years. His wife hurried forward to confirm. When she saw Hachiko, she could hardly believe her eyes. She held Hachiko and cried. Until that snowy evening, Hachiko finally saw his master emerge from the station. It quickly ran over and jumped into its master's arms. Together, they went to a world where they would never be separated again.